My name is Noah Ellison, and I still remember the exact moment the illusion shattered. 3:07 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was standing in our bedroom, stacking freshly laundered shirts into neat piles on the dresser, when my phone vibrated against the hardwood floor. The afternoon sun slanted in through the blinds, painting stripes across the room and making dust motes dance in the light. Up until that second, everything felt normal. The quiet hum of the washer in the hallway, the clean scent of detergent hanging in the air, the soft weight of routine settling around me. I thought I was home, safe and loved. I bent to grab the matching socks tumbling onto the floor, then straightened up just as the display lit with my wife's name, Savannah. My thumb froze over the green icon. I welcomed her calls. She was a schoolteacher and often called between classes or on her breaks, but today she rarely phoned during the afternoon. I traced the screen with a hesitant finger, bracing myself for a mundane, "How's your day?" or a quick, "Running late" apology. Anything but what came next. No hello. No, "Hi, babe." Just static crackle, distant wind, then faint laughter. I pressed the phone to my ear, my heart thumping so hard it made my palms sweat. "Savannah," I whispered. The wind flipped the edge of a script on the other end. Then her voice. Soft, the edges warmed with amusement, but carrying a chill I'd never heard before. "I miss you," she said. Those two words should have been a bomb, but they felt malicious, intended to sting. My entire body stiffened, muscle by muscle, as if someone had pulled a string in my spine and locked me into place. Before I could frame a response, the voice of a man cut in. Low, familiar, confident. Griffin. Her ex from college, the one she'd called a harmless mistake, a chapter better forgotten. "He's just keeping my bed warm until you come back," she said, casual as if she were reciting the weather report. Griffin chuckled, and I realized it wasn't a mistake at all, but a performance, an intimate joke I was never meant to hear. My mind spun with images of them together. Shared blankets, whispered conversations, kisses stolen in the dark. My chest tightened so severely I could barely draw a breath. My palms went clammy, and the phone slipped from my grip. I rose stiffly and reached for the dresser, clutching the edge until my knuckles whitened. The scent of detergent and fabric softener suddenly felt nauseating, sterile and cold, like a hospital waiting room. The shirts I'd folded lay forgotten, crumpled beneath my fingers. My heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears, like a warning drum at the gates of some terrible realization. Time fractured. Every second stretched out painfully. I pressed red to end the call, but the image of Savannah's voice, her laughter, Griffin's smug tone, those remained etched in my mind like graffiti on my soul. I sank onto the edge of the bed, phone clutched to my chest, realizing that nothing would ever feel the same. The room shifted around me. Once a sanctuary, it had transformed in a breath into a cage of betrayal and broken trust. I sat there for what felt like hours, though it was only moments, replaying the scraps of that conversation, chasing any excuse that could explain it away. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe she was testing me. Maybe, but I knew every maybe was a lie I told myself to keep from falling apart. My body trembled with an anger so raw it felt elemental, and tears pricked behind my eyes, tears of disbelief, grief, and a rage that felt both hot and hollow. At last, I closed my eyes and let my head fall back against the pillows. My breath evened out, but my mind roared louder than ever. The assurance of love washed away, leaving only bitter clarity. She hadn't stumbled. She'd stepped willingly into a life I was kept from seeing. The truth clawed its way into every corner of my heart, demanding that I face it. I was not the only man in her bed. I was just the placeholder, the safety net she'd cling to until something more thrilling, or more permanent, came along. I rose again and picked up the phone, my fingers moving with surprising calm. I navigated to her contact and pressed block. No hesitation, no second thought. The screen confirmed the action, and the line went dark. In that silence, I felt cold, but I also felt alive, sharply awake to a world where the love I believed in had been an illusion. And now, I was the mistake she slept beside every night. I stood there in the middle of the bedroom, the phone still warm in my hand, as if the device itself understood the weight of what it had just transmitted. 20 minutes had passed, maybe more. The sun had shifted just enough to cast new shadows across the room, but I hadn't moved. My fingers were clenched around the phone so tightly, I felt the edges cutting into my skin. Every breath I took seemed to fight its way up from somewhere deep and raw. Then, as if none of it had happened, Her name lit up my screen again. Savannah. This time, it wasn't a call, it was a text. Don't be late. Dinner's ready, smiling face with smiling eyes. I stared at the message. Read it twice. The smiling emoji at the end somehow made it worse. That same mouth that had just told another man she missed him, now smiling at me in pixels. My stomach turned. The gall of it. The calculation. Either she didn't know I'd heard everything, or worse, she did and thought I'd pretend not to. For a few seconds, I debated silence, ignoring her. But something inside me needed to speak. Not for her. For me. I typed with steady fingers, already 8. With someone who actually wants me in her bed. No exclamation point. No dramatic punctuation. Just the facts. Then I hit send and blocked her number. Just like that. No dramatic music. No fireworks. Just a little red, blocked, label that told me I was done. For the first time in a long time, the silence that followed wasn't unbearable. It was clean, cold, clarifying. Like the moment after a storm when the air still hums, but the damage is done. I didn't pace or punch the wall. I just stood there, letting the decision settle in my bones. That night, after hours of walking around the apartment like a ghost trying to relearn his own space, I sat down at the edge of the couch and pulled up Kira's contact. My thumb hovered for a moment. We'd always had a good rhythm. Shared the same coffee order, laughed at the same office jokes, covered for each other during meetings, but it had always been a line we never crossed. She was respectful. I was married. She knew the rules. But now, I wasn't married. Not in any way that counted. I tapped the call button. She picked up on the third ring, her voice soft but bright. Noah? Everything okay? I hesitated. Do you remember what you said that one time at Sable's birthday dinner? About how, if I were single. There was a pause, then a light, amused breath on the other end. Yeah, I remember. Well, I said, my throat thick but my tone steady. Now I am. She didn't say anything right away. Then, gently, you want to talk? I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Yeah, I do. I'll be ready in 20. By the time I pulled up in front of her building, the sky had gone dark, and the streetlights cast long, stretching beams across the pavement. Kira stepped outside wearing a simple black dress, hair tucked behind her ears, her eyes catching the light like she hadn't slept in days. But she smiled when she saw me. Hey, she said, sliding into the passenger seat. You look like hell. Thanks, I muttered, half laughing. It's been a productive day. We drove without music. The city moved past us in muted blurs of neon and headlights, but I didn't mind the quiet. When we reached the restaurant, a rooftop spot downtown with string lights and soft jazz humming beneath the conversation, we settled into a corner table. Low lighting, privacy, space to breathe. Over wine and ribeye, I told her everything. The accidental call, the words, the voice that wasn't mine, her ex, the lie I believed for too long. I didn't tell her to get sympathy. I didn't need pity. I just needed someone to listen, someone who didn't look at me like a man unraveling. Kira never once interrupted. She watched me the way people look at someone they've always wanted to understand, but never had the excuse to get close enough to try. When the plates were cleared and we split a slice of tiramisu, she leaned in. Her voice was low and firm. She didn't deserve you. But you do deserve someone. And not just anyone. Someone who shows up for you. I stared at her for a long time. The way she tilted her head when she spoke. The way her hand rested inches from mine. Not demanding, but open. Kira, I said, my voice a little rough. I don't know if this is a rebound or a revelation, but I feel something here. She nodded. Me too. We drove back to my place, our hands brushing between gears, the kind of silent contact that doesn't need explanation. Inside, we kicked off our shoes and sat on the couch like we had 1,000 times before, but this time, there was no pretense, no boundaries, just the soft hum of truth stretching between us. We talked. Not about betrayal, not about the past, about dreams, about the years we'd both wasted pretending timing was the only thing that mattered. When she kissed me, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about Savannah. It was about me finally choosing myself. When she stayed the night, I didn't feel guilt. I felt like I had finally come home. I picked Kira up around 7:30 p.m. sharp. She stepped out of her apartment in a navy blue dress that floated just above her knees, subtle but elegant, the kind of dress that didn't scream for attention but made you stare anyway. Her hair was swept up, loose strands curling around her jaw, And when she smiled at me, it wasn't polite or nervous. It was steady, familiar. A balm I didn't know I needed until she sat beside me. "Nice shirt," she said as she buckled in. Her eyes flicked over me. "You look different." "Yeah?" I asked, adjusting the collar with a small shrug. "Guess clarity comes with a dress shirt now." She grinned, but didn't press. That was one of the things I'd always admired about Kira. She didn't poke. She gave space without making it feel like distance. We drove downtown in silence broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional traffic signals chime. The rooftop restaurant came into view. Brick exterior, wrapped in warm amber lights, soft jazz drifting from above like a promise of peace. I hadn't planned this part. I just remembered once mentioning it to Kira during a lunch break months ago, and the way her face lit up when she said she'd never been. That stuck with me. Some things just do. The hostess led us to a corner table. The city stretched out beneath us in glowing veins of light and glass. People moved in miniature below, unaware that high above them, I was redefining what closeness meant. Kira didn't ask right away. She let me settle into my chair, sip from the water glass, study the menu without pressure. Only after our orders were placed, steak for me, grilled salmon for her, did she lean forward, her voice gentle but direct. "You want to talk about it?" So I did. Everything. I told her about 3:07 p.m. The laundry, the sudden static of betrayal that now lived behind every blink. I told her about the wind, the chuckle, Savannah's voice saying, "He's just keeping my bed warm." The way I sat there afterward, surrounded by socks and shirts and 15 years of false safety. I told her about the text, the emoji, the way my hands didn't even shake when I blocked her. Kira didn't flinch or fill the silence. She listened, hands folded on the linen tablecloth, brows drawn not in pity, but in quiet anger. It wasn't performative. It was real. When I paused, she reached across the table and placed her fingers lightly over mine. "Noah," she said slowly, "you're not broken." "She is. I'm not sure I believe that yet." "You will." Our food came, and for a while we didn't talk about Savannah or Griffin or betrayal. We talked about life. About the time Kira tried to make her grandmother's pecan pie and set the oven on fire. About how I once locked myself out of the apartment wearing only a towel. We laughed. Real laughter. The kind that pulls you back into your body after grief tries to evict you. By the time dessert arrived, I felt like I could breathe again. Not just inhale and exhale, but actually breathe. As I leaned back in my chair, feeling more full than I'd felt in years. Of food, yes, but also of something resembling hope. I looked at Kira and said, it never felt like this with her. She tilted her head. Like what? Easy. She didn't say anything. She just nodded and smiled, a slow, thoughtful curve of her lips that held more power than any speech. When we got back to my place, I didn't have a plan. I didn't expect her to stay. I didn't even expect her to come in. But she followed me through the door, kicked off her heels at the entryway, and walked barefoot across the hardwood like she'd been doing it for years. We sat on the couch. No TV. No distractions. Just a quiet between us that felt sacred. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a while. "Yeah. Did you ever really love her?" "I mean, truly." I stared at the dark screen of the television across from us, our reflections faint in the glass. I loved the idea of her. The life we said we built. I think I was more committed to the commitment than I was to the reality. Kira let out a breath like she'd been holding it in for weeks. That makes sense. She turned toward me, tucking her legs beneath her, and for the first time, I let myself see her without the filter of office boundaries or emotional caution. Kira was not a backup plan. She wasn't a rebound. She wasn't Savannah's opposite. She was just her. And sitting next to her, I felt like a man who had finally stopped apologizing for being disappointed. "I don't know what this is," I said quietly, "or what it's supposed to be, but I feel something, and I haven't felt anything real in a long time." She didn't reply with words. She kissed me, and it wasn't fireworks or cinematic passion. It was quiet. Sure. Soft, like the start of something that could be trusted. Her hand rested gently on my chest, and for once, my heart didn't feel like it was under siege. Later, when she stayed the night, not because she had to, but because we both wanted her to, I didn't feel like I was running from anything. I felt like I was returning, not to who I used to be, but to someone new, someone more honest, someone who had survived betrayal and still believed in the possibility of connection. When I closed my eyes beside her, I didn't dream about Savannah. I didn't dream about revenge. I slept, and that, more than anything, felt like closure. Just past midnight, I was drifting in and out of sleep when the pounding began. It was jarring, not frantic, but deliberate. Like whoever was on the other side of the door wasn't here to plead. They were here to intrude. I sat up on the couch slowly, the soft glow of the kitchen light casting long shadows across the floor. Kira stood beside me, a blanket pulled halfway over her lap. She blinked once, then again, registering the sound. Her voice was soft but alert. "Do you want me to leave?" "No," I said quietly. She already did. The knocking didn't stop. I rose and crossed the living room, barefoot, heart thudding, not with fear, but a strange mixture of anticipation and calm. I didn't need to guess who it was. I knew. Even before I looked through the peephole, I could feel her presence like a storm I'd already outlasted. And there she was, Savannah. Barefoot on the porch. Her hair messy, makeup smudged, eyes swollen and red. She clutched her phone in one hand like it was a lifeline, the other balled in a tight fist at her side. The porch light caught the shimmer of tears clinging to her lashes. She was crying, but not the quiet, ashamed kind of crying. No, this was the kind born of panic, of something slipping from her grasp and realizing too late that she was never the one holding it in the first place. "Noah," she called, her voice cracking. I didn't respond, just watched her through the peephole, like I was watching a scene from a film I used to know by heart, one that had lost all its magic. The woman outside looked like my wife, but the wife I remembered would never have said what she said to Griffin, would never have stood so comfortably in someone else's arms while I folded our laundry, believing we were still a team. She rang the doorbell, twice, then knocked again. "Noah, please. Just let me explain. You have to let me talk to you." Behind me, I heard Kira shifting again on the couch, but she didn't say anything. She didn't need to. This was my moment to decide what mattered, past or future, illusion or clarity. "You have to believe me," Savannah said, louder now. "You misunderstood. It wasn't what you think, but it was. It was exactly what I thought." I'd heard the tone in her voice, the softness she reserved for someone she wanted. I'd heard the possessiveness in the way she said, "Until you come back." There was no misinterpretation, no editing the truth into something I could live with. And now, here she was, trying to rewrite the scene after the credits had already rolled. "I know you're in there," she added, voice breaking again. "You're not answering my texts. Don't do this. Don't throw everything away." I let her speak. I let her plead. But I never touched the lock. I never turned the knob. I didn't owe her an audience. Eventually, her voice lowered. She leaned against the door, and for a moment, I wondered if she'd slide down onto the porch and cry there until morning. But Savannah was many things, persistent, persuasive, pretty, but she was not patient. After 15 minutes, she gave up. I watched her retreat down the steps barefoot, her arms crossed tightly around herself, the cool night air brushing past her like even it didn't want her near my door. Her car door opened with a groan, slammed harder than necessary, and then she was gone. For a moment, I just stood there, not triumphant, not heartbroken, just grounded, like something had finally clicked into place. When I turned back, Kira was sitting up, the blanket folded neatly in her lap. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, actually, I think I am." She didn't press, didn't try to play savior. She just smiled small, honest, and followed me into the kitchen as I reached for the coffee maker. It was ridiculous, really. Making coffee at 12:30 in the morning like it was a normal Tuesday. Like the woman who shattered my marriage hadn't just been on my doorstep with tear-stained cheeks and hollow excuses. But it was in the normal that I found my footing. I handed Kira a mug, and we stood there, barefoot and still, sipping coffee in the quiet of a home that finally felt like mine again. Later that morning, after she left for work, I found the note, taped crookedly to the front door, flapping gently in the breeze. "Noah, this is insane. We need to talk. You're throwing everything away for a misunderstanding." Savannah, no dramatic declaration. No apology. Just gaslighting scribbled in expensive ink on thick, cream-colored paper. The kind of note meant to guilt, not heal. I held it for a few seconds. The paper was smooth, professional, like the woman who wrote it. Savannah had always known how to dress up the truth, how to make things sound better than they were. But this time, there was no dressing left that could cover what had already been exposed. I tore the note in half, then in half again, and again, until it was nothing but a pile of shredded pretense in my palm. I dropped it into the trash, washed my hands, and poured a second cup of coffee. Not for her. For Kira. Monday arrived like a dare. Cold, gray, and heavy with the kind of energy that made the air feel thick. I walked into the clinic just before noon, trying to shake off the stiffness in my shoulders. The weekend had been surreal, raw, revealing, and strangely peaceful in the way only clarity could be. I hadn't responded to Savannah's note, hadn't called her, hadn't checked for new messages. I didn't need to. I'd made my choice, and for once, I didn't second-guess it. The clinic buzzed with the usual rhythm. Phones ringing, muffled conversations behind patient doors, the occasional laugh from the nurse's station. Familiar. Steady. I needed that. Routine had become a balm. I greeted a few staff members, forced a polite smile, and retreated to the back office to prep charts for my afternoon patients. I had just finished updating Mrs. Claremont's treatment plan when my name crackled through the intercom. Noah, there's someone asking for you in the waiting room. Says it's urgent. Family emergency. I frowned. My family didn't do emergencies. Not without a flurry of group texts and at least one poorly timed joke from my cousin Brett. I stood slowly, already bracing for something unexpected. When I stepped into the lobby, I saw her. Savannah. She stood near the reception desk, visibly upset, arms wrapped around herself like armor she didn't remember how to wear. Her eyes found mine instantly, full of panic and desperation. She looked smaller somehow, like she'd folded in on herself. Noah, she said quickly, stepping toward me. I didn't flinch. Didn't move. She hesitated just feet away, trying to read me, probably searching for some trace of the man who used to bend whenever she leaned. But I wasn't bending today. You can't just block me and act like I don't exist, she said. This isn't how we handle things. Funny, I said flatly, that you're so concerned about how we handle things after telling another man I was just keeping your bed warm. Her eyes darted around. Nurses. Patients. A man flipping through a parenting magazine 2 chairs over. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Noah, please. Not here. You came here, I replied. You made it public. It wasn't what it sounded like, she whispered, her voice cracking. I tilted my head. You said you missed him. You said I was a placeholder. Which part of that was unclear? She flinched, jaw trembling. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was venting. Griffin caught me off guard, and it just came out wrong. I let that hang for a moment, let her feel the weight of how absurd it sounded. And he just happened to be close enough to make you laugh like that? Close enough for Wynn to carry your voices over a live call. Noah, we didn't do anything. I swear. It was just a conversation I should never have had. You're right. You shouldn't have. But you did. And now here we are. Her face twisted between frustration and grief. You're just going to throw us away? Over one stupid moment? I stepped back. You threw us away. I'm just making peace with the wreckage. She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand to stop her. The lobby had quieted, the attention shifting toward us like we were performing on stage. I didn't care. For once, I wasn't shrinking to make her more comfortable. You made a choice, Savannah, I said. And now I've made mine. I turned and walked away. The nurses didn't say anything. One of them nodded subtly as I passed, a flicker of solidarity in her eyes. I appreciated that more than she'd ever know. Back in my office, I closed the door and exhaled slowly. My hands were trembling, not from doubt, but from the release. I had carried that confrontation in my chest for days, and now that it was done, I felt lighter, like I had put down a backpack full of stones I didn't even realize I'd been carrying for years. I leaned back in my chair, let my eyes close for a moment. Then came the knock. Not Savannah, thank God. It was Dr. Patel, my supervisor. He stepped in, calm as ever, arms folded. Everything all right? I nodded. Handled. He studied me for a second. You've always been one of the steady ones. Just don't let personal chaos turn into professional cracks. I gave him a tight smile. It won't. He lingered another beat, then nodded and stepped out. I appreciated the check-in, the gentle warning, but he didn't need to worry. Because the chaos? That was behind me now. Savannah didn't come back that day. No more surprise appearances. No more cries for forgiveness. Maybe the truth finally clicked. Or maybe she went back to Griffin, looking for the comfort of a past that never judged her. I didn't care. That evening, as I walked out into the cool air and made my way to the car, I saw the city a little differently. Not as something I had to survive, but something I could finally experience. I pulled out my phone and sent one message. Kira, you free tonight? I feel like cooking. The reply came less than a minute later. Kira, only if you're making that rosemary chicken. I smiled, tucked the phone into my pocket, drove home with the windows cracked and the music low. I was no longer bracing for betrayal. I was building something honest. And that started with saying goodbye to everything that tried to convince me I wasn't enough. The first knock came just after 7 p.m. I had just set the water to boil and was chopping rosemary when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I wasn't alarmed either. My world had already burned and rebuilt itself in the last week. What was one more knock? I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked to the door, opening it just wide enough to see who stood on the other side. It was Melanie, Savannah's best friend, her echo. Her second voice in every group chat, her partner in pity, the one who used to give me half-hearted hugs and awkward eye rolls during couples game nights. I hadn't seen her since the wedding anniversary Savannah forgot 2 years ago, and Melanie tried to save with a last-minute dinner plan. Now she stood on my doorstep like a messenger sent from a kingdom I no longer served. Noah, she said, her voice trembling a little, please, just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I leaned against the doorframe and studied her. Tight jeans, a fitted blouse, makeup done to perfection, like she was trying to look casual but had clearly prepared this moment. Her eyes, though, those told the truth. They were nervous, flickering. She wasn't here to accuse. She was here to convince. I'm in the middle of cooking, I said flatly. If this is about Savannah, don't waste your breath. She's not doing well. Melanie rushed in, eyes pleading. She's not eating. She's barely sleeping. She's confused and heartbroken, and I held up a hand. Ask Savannah who Griffin is. The sentence stopped her mid-sentence. I could see it in her face, the confusion, then the slow dawning of something she hadn't expected to confront tonight. Griffin, she echoed, blinking. Yeah, her mistake from college. You remember him, right? Because I sure do. He's the one she called while I was folding our laundry. The one she laughed with while telling him I was just keeping her bed warm. Melanie stepped back slightly, the confident posture crumbling. She said it was just a joke, that it came out wrong. And you believe that? I don't know what to believe anymore, she admitted, voice cracking. She's falling apart, and I thought if I could talk to you, maybe I'd go back? I interrupted. Forgive and forget because she's finally uncomfortable? She's falling apart because she's been caught, not because she's sorry. Melanie looked down at the porch. She didn't argue. Tell her this, I said, my tone even. Tell her to stop sending people to clean up what she broke. I'm not the guy waiting on an apology. I'm the guy who's moved on. Melanie hesitated, then nodded. Okay, I'll tell her. She turned to leave but paused at the bottom step. You were always good to her, she said, not turning around. No, I replied. I was better than she deserved. She didn't say anything after that, just walked down the path and disappeared into the night. I closed the door, locked it, and went back to the kitchen where the rosemary still clung to the cutting board and steam curled from the pot like nothing had changed. But something had. I wasn't shaken. I wasn't second-guessing. Savannah had been my storm, but now she was just background noise, like rain falling on a window I no longer looked through. The next day, it was Jules who called. Her younger sister. The one Savannah always said was too naive, too soft. The one who used to bring me Christmas cookies even after Savannah stopped participating in the holidays. When I saw her name flash on my phone, I paused, considered ignoring it. But curiosity won. Noah, she said quickly when I answered. I just talked to Melanie. Of course. She told me everything, Jules continued. I confronted Savannah. I leaned against my kitchen counter, phone pressed to my ear. And she said it was just coffee, just catching up with Griffin for closure. I snorted. Closure doesn't usually involve saying your husband is a placeholder. I know, Jules said, her voice heavy. I asked her that. I told her what you heard. Word for word. Silence passed between us like a shared weight. She told me he was out of her life, Jules whispered. That he meant nothing. I believed her. But now you know she lied. Yeah, her voice cracked. She lied to me too. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Jules didn't deserve to be a casualty in this. She wanted me to call you, she added quietly, to try to talk some sense into you. And will you? No, Jules replied. You were always good to her. You deserved better. I closed my eyes, a dull ache blooming behind them. Thank you for saying that. Just be happy, okay? With whoever makes you feel seen again. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Instead, I nodded to myself, a lump forming in my throat. We said goodbye and hung up. The house was quiet again, peacefully so. I looked around, at the half-packed boxes of Savannah's things I still hadn't tossed, at the books she never read but liked to display, at the little staged corners of a life we pretended was whole. And I finally exhaled. Because this wasn't just about an affair. This was about the years I spent apologizing for not being enough. For working late. For showing love in quiet acts instead of loud gestures. For not being dangerous enough, dramatic enough, broken enough to hold her attention. But now? Now I was no longer trying to be anything for anyone else. Let them call. Let them knock. Let them try to rewrite the story to make her the victim. The truth had already been spoken, and I was done pretending it hadn't been heard. Thursday morning bloomed with the kind of quiet confidence I hadn't felt in years. I woke up before my alarm, made coffee without fumbling the filter, and even managed to iron my shirt without cursing once. Kira was coming over after my shift. We'd made plans for breakfast at Mara's Cafe, the kind of simple, real thing that felt like a reward after a week of emotional wreckage. By the time I pulled into the cafe's parking lot, Kira was already waiting outside, leaning casually against the brick wall, her sunglasses perched on top of her head and a soft smile curling the edges of her lips. She looked like peace wrapped in denim and sunshine. No complications. No games. Just presence. And right now, that was everything. We sat near the window, tucked in a corner booth where the morning sun streamed across our table. Our coffees came quickly, along with 2 plates of fluffy eggs, toasted sourdough, and strawberries that looked too perfect to be real. Kira talked about her neighbor's cat that kept stealing socks from their laundry room. I told her about the patient who tried to bribe me with cupcakes to skip a follow-up appointment. It was normal. Honest. We were laughing over nothing when the front door opened, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Savannah. I felt her before I saw her. Like a shift in gravity. She walked in fast, eyes scanning the room, posture rigid. Her hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, makeup slightly smeared, as if she'd tried to fix herself and failed somewhere between denial and rage. Her eyes landed on us. Then she moved, directly toward our table. Kira noticed her before I could say anything. She calmly took another sip of her coffee, as if this were just another morning, just another person entering the cafe, and not my ex-wife with fury stitched into her stride. Savannah stopped at the edge of the table, eyes locked on me, voice sharp. This is ridiculous. We need to talk. Her presence shattered the serenity like a rock through a window. People turned. The couple next to us paused mid-bite. A waitress stuttered at the espresso machine. I looked at her, unmoved. You made your choice, Savannah. This is mine. Her eyes shifted to Kira. Who is this? She demanded, like she had a right to the answer. Kira set her cup down gently and smiled, polite, controlled, unbothered. Someone who wasn't just keeping a seat warm. Savannah's face flushed to deep red, and for a second, I saw the version of her that used to argue in whispers at dinner parties. The one who smiled through clenched teeth and tightened her grip on your wrist just enough to remind you who held the leash. But that Savannah didn't scare me anymore. You moved on that fast, she spat, voice rising. You couldn't even wait a week before dragging someone else into our mess? I didn't move on fast, I said, voice calm, deliberate. I moved on the moment you said I never mattered. That call? That was the end. Everything after that has just been clarity. Her mouth opened like she had a dozen arguments locked and loaded, but the words didn't come. Not this time. Not with Kira sitting there. Not with the room full of people watching her unravel in real time. You made me feel like nothing, I added, my voice low but strong. Like a piece of furniture you got used to. And now you're mad that someone else sees value where you didn't. Savannah blinked fast, her lips trembling. The show was ending, and she knew it. I messed up, she whispered. I didn't reply. I just picked up my coffee again, and she stood there for a second longer before realizing she had nothing else to offer. No more lies, no more leverage. She turned and left the cafe, her exit far quieter than her arrival. Kira didn't speak for a while. Neither did I. Then she nudged her plate closer to me and said, "You want the rest of my toast? You earned it." I smiled, the tension in my shoulders melting. Don't mind if I do. The room returned to normal around us. Conversations resumed. Coffee cups clinked. A baby cried from across the room, and someone spilled orange juice by the register. But something fundamental had changed. For so long, I had been defined by my place in Savannah's world: husband, provider, forgiver, fool. I'd played my part to perfection, hoping one day she'd see me not just as reliable, but as irreplaceable. Now, I understood something more powerful than any apology she could have offered. I was never invisible. She just chose not to look. And now, someone else was seeing me without effort. That morning, in a crowded cafe with the scent of coffee in the air and my hand brushing Kira's, I felt something shift deep in my chest, not just healing, but arrival. I wasn't rebuilding what I lost. I was building something new, something real. 2 days passed in calm. No calls, no texts, no notes taped to my door. Just silence. The kind of silence that tells you someone's not done, they're just recalibrating. Savannah had always been strategic. She didn't give up easily. And when she realized her tears, her friends, her family hadn't softened me, she did what manipulators always do. She turned digital. It was late Saturday morning. Kira and I had spent the night at her place. Nothing extravagant, just pasta and a movie, followed by falling asleep in each other's arms without the usual fear of what would go wrong next. I was frying eggs in her kitchen, watching the yolks bubble under the heat, when she walked in holding her phone with an expression I hadn't seen on her before. She set it on the counter. "You need to see this." A message. From an Instagram burner account. The profile photo was a blurry rose. No name, just a username with random numbers and a string of underscores. I didn't need a detective to tell me who it was. "Your boyfriend has anger problems. Ask him why he dumped me over nothing. He's using you to make me jealous." Kira didn't flinch as I read it. She'd seen worse. She was a woman who'd been cheated on once and abandoned twice, neither of which had managed to break her, only made her stronger. Still, I could feel the quiet weight of it sitting between us. This was Savannah's last tactic, character assassination. Kira picked up her phone again and began typing. I watched her thumbs move deliberately, without hesitation. "I know about the butt dial. I heard it too. Don't contact me again." She hit send, blocked the account, and tossed the phone onto the couch behind her like it was a fruit fly buzzing too close to her drink. "She's desperate," Kira said calmly, pouring herself a glass of water. "And sloppy." I nodded, flipping the eggs. "She doesn't like losing, especially not to someone she underestimated." "She underestimated you," Kira said, stepping closer. "I was just the unexpected bonus." I turned to face her, my hands still greasy with oil and heat. "I'm sorry you got pulled into this mess." She tilted her head. "I'm not. I'd rather be pulled into your mess than sit on the sidelines pretending you're okay." We ate on the balcony. 2 plates, 2 mugs of black coffee, and the kind of morning breeze that makes the world feel new. Savannah's digital dagger didn't pierce anything. Not here. Not anymore. It didn't make me question my choices, and it didn't shake Kira's trust. But it did confirm one thing. Savannah wasn't sorry. She was humiliated. And that's a very different kind of grief. The thing about someone like her is that they don't mourn the loss of love. They mourn the loss of control, the loss of narrative. As long as she could tell the story her way, Noah was cold, distant, distracted, it all made sense. But now the story was public. Kira, the cafe, Melanie, Jules, and worst of all, the truth. That damn accidental call had yanked the curtain back and revealed who she really was. And she hated that. Later that day, I sat on my own couch, scrolling through old photos on my phone, deleting anything that felt like rot. Vacation pictures where Savannah wore that polite, vacant smile. Anniversary dinners with candles and champagne, but no warmth. A video of her dancing in the kitchen while pretending she didn't know I was filming. Now, it just felt staged. Rehearsed. A performance for the audience of me. I stopped at one photo. Me, Savannah, and Griffin, of all people, at a college reunion 5 years ago. His hand was around her shoulder. Mine was around her waist. We all looked happy, but I remembered that night. How I had driven us both home while she giggled over something Griffin whispered in her ear at the bar. I remembered asking her about it later. She waved me off, said, "Don't be jealous, baby. That's ancient history." Ancient history doesn't giggle like that. I deleted the photo. That evening, Kira came over again. She brought Thai food and wore an oversized hoodie that probably belonged to an ex. It didn't matter. It looked better on her anyway. We curled up on the couch, and I told her about the burner account, the old reunion photo, the pieces I was still letting go of. "You're allowed to grieve what you thought it was," she said gently, her fingers laced through mine. "Even if it was never that." "I don't miss her," I admitted. "I miss who I thought I was when I was with her." "That's the most dangerous lie," she said. "Thinking someone makes you whole when they're the one tearing pieces off you." I kissed her shoulder. She rested her head against mine. And in that moment, I realized something. Savannah hadn't left me broken. She left me exposed. To everything I'd ignored. To everything I'd accepted as normal. To every lie I swallowed just to keep the peace. But now, the peace was real. Not because she gave it to me. Because I reclaimed it. That burner message? That was the last gasp of someone who built their power on being the only voice in the room. Now, she had nothing left to say. And I had everything ahead of me. It was supposed to be a quick stop. Groceries. Milk. A few vegetables. Maybe some bread. A quiet, ordinary Saturday chore. I wasn't expecting a moment of closure wedged between the dairy aisle and checkout lines. But sometimes, life doesn't wait for grand stages. Sometimes, the goodbye you didn't realize you needed finds you in the fluorescent hum of aisle 5. I had just picked up a carton of eggs when I saw her. Jules, Savannah's younger sister. She was standing near the frozen food section, holding a bag of peas and staring blankly at the nutrition label like she was trying to translate an ancient language. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she wore an oversized hoodie that likely belonged to someone else. Not fashion-forward, not planned. Just human. Just tired. For a second, I debated walking the other way. I wasn't sure I had the bandwidth for another conversation that began with, "She's not doing well," and ended with some variation of, "You two should talk." But Jules looked up and saw me before I could escape. Her eyes widened, then softened. She didn't smile. She didn't fake it. She just offered a nod of recognition, like two veterans passing each other in a war neither of us signed up for. I walked over slowly, unsure of what would come out of her mouth. "Noah," she said, lowering the bag into her cart. Hey, Jules." A beat passed. Her eyes searched my face. I wondered if she was checking for bitterness, for anger, for grief. But I didn't feel any of those things, not anymore. I felt steady. "Have you been?" she asked. "Better than I expected," I replied honestly. "You?" She laughed softly, more breath than sound. "Trying to avoid the family group chat. It's a full-time job." I smiled, and she smiled back, briefly, like it was borrowed from some better time. Then she leaned against the cart handle and said what I wasn't expecting to hear. I confronted her. My body stiffened. "And she cried," Jules said. "First time I've seen her cry like that in a long time. Not because she lost you, but because she lost the version of you that would have forgiven her." I let that sink in. "She kept saying she needed closure," Jules continued. "That she just met Griffin for coffee. That she didn't mean what she said on the phone. But she said it," I replied, the words slipping out with no venom, just truth. "She meant it in that moment, whether she regrets it now or not." Jules nodded. "She said she needed to know if there was still anything between them, before she fully let go." I stared at her. "So, I was the insurance policy?" No, it's okay." I cut in. "That's what it was, right? I was the guarantee. The steady guy. The husband she could fall back on if the what-if didn't work out. The placeholder until she decided. She swore it wasn't like that. But it was," I said. "It always was. She just didn't say it out loud until the phone betrayed her." Jules looked down, ashamed. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. I shook my head. "You don't owe me an apology. She used to talk about you like you were her anchor," Jules said. "That you were the only person who never left." I met her eyes. That's the problem. She didn't want an anchor. She wanted an audience. And when I stopped clapping, the show didn't work anymore. Jules blinked. Her lips pressed together like she was swallowing emotion she hadn't prepared to show. "She told me you were cold. That you didn't laugh with her anymore. That you were distant." I was exhausted, I said. Exhausted from loving someone who kept her heart parked somewhere else. Exhausted from giving more than I got. It wasn't distance. It was survival. Jules nodded slowly, her voice soft. "I believe you." Silence stretched again. "She's been quiet since the cafe," she added after a moment. "Since she saw you with Kira?" That rattled her. "She thought I'd wait," I said. "She always believed that no matter what she did, I'd still be here. Still forgiving. Still folding laundry and making excuses." "And you're not." "No." I'm not. Jules looked at me with something like gratitude in her expression. I'm glad. You deserve better. I smiled at her then, really smiled, the kind that reached all the way to the part of me that used to be broken. I'm good to someone else now, I said simply. Her eyes lit with understanding. Kira. I nodded. She's everything Savannah never noticed. Everything I didn't realize I needed. She seems solid. She's honest, I said. She doesn't try to rewrite the truth to make herself look better. She just shows up. That's all I ever wanted. Jules reached into her cart, pulled out the bag of peas, and tossed it into mine. For the pasta you're probably going to cook for her tonight. I laughed. You always did like feeding people. She shrugged. It's easier than feelings. We started to drift toward the checkout lanes together, still talking about small things. Recipes, mutual friends, Savannah's uncanny ability to burn toast. It felt less like a confrontation and more like a goodbye. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet kind that closes a chapter without slamming the cover. When we reached the self-checkout, Jules turned to me. She'll always tell herself that you changed, she said. But the truth is, you stopped lying to yourself. That's what she can't handle. I nodded, feeling the truth of it settle deep in my chest. She did me a favor, I said, and I meant it. Because sometimes, the worst kind of betrayal is the kind that lets you keep believing you're happy. Savannah's mistake, the one she whispered into the wind thinking I'd never hear, wasn't just infidelity. It was exposure. It was the curtain pulling back. It was the truth I'd been afraid to say out loud. That I had been loving someone who only knew how to accept love if it came with conditions. Applause. Endless patience. A version of me that never asked for anything back. But now? Now I asked. Now I received. Kira didn't ask me to shrink. She didn't ask me to wait. She didn't ask me to forgive someone else's damage to prove I was a good man. She just sat beside me, ate breakfast with me, kissed me like I was something whole, not something tolerated. And when I left the grocery store that afternoon, bag of peas in one hand and my phone buzzing with Kira's message, want me to bring wine? I knew something for certain. Closure doesn't come when someone says sorry. It comes when you stop needing them to. Savannah was quiet now. No more notes. No more burner accounts. No more late night pleading at the door. She was probably still rewriting the story somewhere, painting herself as the misunderstood wife, the one who made a mistake because her husband just didn't understand her anymore. But that version didn't matter. The truth had already been spoken. And I was no longer living in the shadows of what could have been. I was building something better, not to prove anything, but because I'd finally made space for someone who saw me not as a placeholder, but as a choice. And I was finally ready to believe I was worth choosing. The first time Kira met my parents, it was a quiet Sunday afternoon. No dramatic introductions, no formal clothes or polished rehearsals. Just honesty in the air, the smell of roasted chicken from the oven, and the comforting clink of ceramic mugs as my mother set down tea for everyone at the table. There was something healing about it all, like we were smoothing over the scars left by years of trying to belong somewhere I never fully did. Kira wore a soft blue blouse and a simple necklace, nothing flashy, just like her. She smiled easily, spoke when it mattered, and when my mother asked her what she did for a living, she didn't over-explain. She just said, I help people solve problems, and somehow, that was enough. My father, usually the more skeptical of the two, took one look at the way she made space for me in every sentence, and I could see the unspoken approval settle in his expression. After dinner, when the plates had been cleared and the last of the wine poured, my mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. She didn't say much, just leaned against the counter with that same tired but wise gaze she always gave when she knew the storm had passed. She makes the room feel like a home, she said. And that's when I knew this was real. Not a rebound, not a distraction, not some emotionally charged reaction to betrayal. Kira was what came after the truth. She was what felt possible once the illusion was gone. She didn't try to fix me. She just let me arrive, fully, completely, without apology. That weekend, we planned a trip together. Nothing extravagant. Just a cabin by the lake. Quiet. Stillness. Somewhere we could breathe without the noise of unfinished arguments or broken trust dragging us back into someone else's chaos. I told her I wanted fresh air, a little distance from the place where everything came undone. She said, then let's go. Just say when. Savannah hadn't reached out in weeks. No notes. No texts. No late-night knocks. It was as if the silence she once feared had finally swallowed her whole. And I didn't mourn that. I didn't wait by the door wondering if she'd come back. I didn't scan every unknown number like it might carry her last, desperate words. She had her chance. She had love, and she traded it for nostalgia. For a moment with someone she once blamed for her worst decisions. But there's no safe in that kind of gamble. She wanted something thrilling and something loyal. She lost both. I used to wonder if the butt dial was an accident, or if some part of her subconscious wanted me to hear, wanted to end the lie without having to face the confrontation. But after everything that followed, the notes, the manipulation, the burner account, I realized it didn't matter. Intent didn't change impact. That call, whether a mistake or a message, saved me. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a reveal. It pulled the mask off a marriage I had been holding together with hope and habit. It reminded me that being chosen only matters if it's done freely, completely. Because there's a brutal difference between being needed and being used. Savannah needed me for stability, for the narrative, for the version of herself that made sense to her friends and family. But she used me as a placeholder, a symbol of adulthood, of having it all together, of boxes checked and smiles posed in Christmas photos. And I played along. For a long time, I played along, until I didn't. Now I live slower, wiser. I made coffee with intention. I said no more often than maybe. I stopped tolerating people who only showed up when it was convenient for them. And I kept Kira close, not because she demanded it, but because she never made love feel like a test I had to keep passing. One night, a few days before our trip, I found an old wedding photo tucked in the back of a drawer. Savannah's eyes were fixed on the camera, mine on her. I studied the picture for a long time, not with sadness, but with clarity. I saw the man I was then, hopeful, loyal, eager to believe that love alone could weather anything. I didn't pity him. I just knew better now. I slipped the photo back into the drawer and closed it for good. A few nights later, Kira and I sat on my porch, a blanket thrown over both our laps, mugs of cider in our hands. She looked at me, really looked at me, and asked, "Do you ever think about her?" It wasn't a jealous question. It was an honest one. I thought for a moment, then nodded. I think about who I was when I was with her, and who I had to become to survive that. Kira reached for my hand under the blanket. And now, I don't just survive, I said. I live. She smiled, leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat there in that soft hush of mutual understanding. Later that week, while packing for the cabin, I found a necklace tangled in an old jewelry box. Savannah's, left behind in her rush, or maybe on purpose. A small silver charm, nothing expensive, just something she used to wear when we first met. I stared at it for a beat, then tossed it into the donation box. It no longer held weight. Just history I didn't need to carry anymore. We left for the lake on a Friday morning. The drive was long, winding through trees that had just started to show signs of autumn. Reds and oranges blinked through the windshield like the year shedding its old skin. It felt symbolic, moving towards something quiet and true, away from the noise of what once was. When we got to the cabin, Kira stood on the porch and took a deep breath. "It smells like peace." I laughed. "Smells like pine needles and moss to me." Same thing. We spent that weekend without talking about Savannah once. Not because we were avoiding it, but because it no longer mattered. The shadow had passed. The hurt had processed. The ghost had stopped knocking. In the stillness of that cabin, with the lake mirroring the sky and Kira's laughter echoing off the trees, I finally understood something I'd resisted for too long. I had been more than faithful. I had been present. I had offered love that was consistent, quiet, and strong, the kind of love you build a life on. And she mistook it for convenience. But that mistake wasn't mine to carry. I was never temporary. I was never second best. She was. She was the one who couldn't choose fully, who needed to test the past while holding the future hostage, who wanted fireworks but didn't understand the beauty of a steady flame. And now? Now I no longer wanted fireworks. I wanted peace, depth, a love that didn't make me feel like I was being tolerated. Savannah's silence was the loudest apology she'd ever given, and I finally accepted it, not with anger, not with triumph, but with peace. Because the truest kind of healing doesn't always come with closure from the one who hurt you. Sometimes, it comes from the moment you realize you never needed it to begin with.